You check your account. $4,200. It hasn't moved. The number just sits there, exactly where you left it. Clean. Still. Predictable. It looks quiet. Nothing shifts. Nothing reacts. And that's exactly why it feels safe. You close the app for a second, then open it again. Same number. No change. But somewhere else, it already has. Not in your name. Not in a place you can point to. You don't see it. You don't feel it. But it's already been set in motion. You pause a little longer than usual. Not because anything looks wrong, because everything looks perfectly fine. And that's what doesn't sit right. You get paid on time. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, the number shows up. Quietly, no friction. You already know where it's going before it even arrives. Some of it disappears into things you barely notice anymore. Bills, food, subscriptions that renew on their own. Some of it gets pushed aside, savings. Some of it gets moved into something that feels like progress, something labeled future. You don't really think about it now. You don't need to. You built the system once. You set the rules. Now it just runs. Automatic transfers. Scheduled movements. Small decisions made a long time ago that keep repeating. It feels structured. It feels under control. You believe you're being responsible. You believe this is what people who get it do. You don't overspend. You don't ignore your money. You check it, you adjust things when needed, then you move on. There's no chaos here. No urgency. Just a steady rhythm that repeats week after week. And because it repeats, it starts to feel right. Familiar. Safe. You stop questioning it. You trust the structure. You assume it's doing what it's supposed to do. You assume something is quietly building in the background. Something stable, something reliable. And nothing around you suggests otherwise. Everyone else seems to be doing something similar. So you keep going. But there's a point where that assumption stops holding. You don't notice it when it starts. There's no break, no signal. Nothing collapses. It just begins to drift. Not in a way you can clearly point to, not in a way that demands your attention. It's subtle. A quiet misalignment that keeps stretching slowly over time. You still think the money you hold is yours. But the moment it sits still, it stops being under your control. It waits. And while it waits, something else decides what happens next. You don't see that decision being made. You don't hear it. You just see the number, unchanged, on your screen. Ownership feels like control. It feels like certainty. But it isn't. There are places where money doesn't behave like this. Places where it doesn't just sit. It moves. Not because there's more of it, but because it has somewhere to go. Access comes first. Not growth. Not return. Just access. It's not about how much you have. It's about where it can reach once it leaves you. You were taught to accumulate, to build, to stack. But accumulation doesn't change your position. It just increases what you're holding in the same place. Structure is what changes everything. The shape around your money decides what it becomes, not the effort that created it. You can work harder. You can save more. You can be more disciplined than everyone around you, and still stay exactly where you are, because nothing in the structure moved. The system doesn't reward effort the way you think it does. It routes outcomes based on where you're positioned inside it. And right now, you're not really inside it. You're close enough to see parts of it, close enough to participate a little, but not where it actually compounds at full scale. You're standing at the edge. And from the edge, everything looks like progress. Numbers go up, accounts grow. It feels like forward motion. until you realize something uncomfortable. Movement and direction aren't the same thing. And once that clicks, the system stops looking simple. Because it isn't one thing. It changes shape depending on where you stand inside it. At the beginning, you hold money. You keep it still. You protect it. Nothing unexpected happens. And that's the benefit. It stays exactly where you put it. You can check it anytime. You can rely on it being there. But that's also the limit. It doesn't move unless something else moves it. And something else always does. You just don't see when it happens. Or how. Or why. At some point, that stillness starts to feel incomplete. Not wrong. Just not enough. Like something is missing, even if you can't explain what it is. So you step in. Not all at once. Just a little. You begin to participate. Now the numbers change. They move. Up. Down. You start paying more attention. Checking more often. Because now there's something to react to. And when it reacts, you feel it. A drop doesn't feel like a number. It feels personal. You hesitate. You hover over decisions longer than you expected. Do you stay? Do you pull back? You tell yourself you're being rational. But underneath that, there's tension. The system isn't testing what you know. It doesn't care how much you've read. It's testing whether you stay when things stop feeling comfortable. You don't have control yet. Not really. You just have exposure. And eventually, you stop pulling away. You stay. And after a while, something quieter happens. You stop deciding. Not because you gave up, because you replaced decisions with something else. Rules. Things you set once and let repeat. Money moves on its own now. It leaves your account at the same time every month. It lands somewhere else without you watching it happen. You don't interrupt it anymore. You don't question it every time. And slowly, something shifts. Not in the numbers. In you. You're not reacting the same way anymore. You're not checking as often. You're not second-guessing every move. You're following a structure that reacts for you. And for a while, that feels like control. But following isn't the same as shaping. And at some point, you start to notice the difference. So you begin to adjust. Small changes. Nothing dramatic. A little shift in timing. A slight change in where things go. A different balance between one place and another. From the outside, it doesn't look like much. But inside the system, those small changes don't stay small. They compound. Each one leaves a trace. Each one builds on the last. And suddenly, mistakes feel heavier than they used to. Because they don't disappear anymore. They carry forward. The system takes whatever you give it and stretches it over time. Good or bad. It doesn't care. That's when you start to understand something most people never see. Precision matters more than effort. Not because effort is useless, but because effort without placement doesn't scale. And then the boundary moves again. You don't notice when it happens. But one day, things start showing up that weren't there before. Not advertised. Not explained. Not something you can easily search for. Just available. Quietly. You realize something uncomfortable. Not everyone gets to see this. You didn't before, and now you do. You can step in, but once you do, you don't move the same way anymore. You don't get to exit whenever you want. You commit. And when you commit, time starts to feel different. It stretches. Liquidity disappears. Flexibility fades. And in exchange, the system offers you something you didn't have before. Access. You feel the weight of that decision. Do you stay flexible? Or do you go deeper? You sit with it longer than you expected. Because once you step in, you don't step out the same way. And eventually, you stop needing the exit. Now things feel different again. You're not just entering systems. You're directing movement inside them. Money doesn't just react anymore. It moves because you place it. And when it moves, something else shifts with it. Not loudly. Not in a way that draws attention. But consistently. You start to notice patterns you didn't see before. Moments where you act, and somewhere else, someone else is forced to respond. You don't know who they are. You never see them. But the pattern is there. They sell. You buy. They exit. You enter. You feel the imbalance, even if you can't fully explain it. And for the first time, you realize you're not playing the same game anymore. And eventually, you stop being a participant at all. The system doesn't run through you anymore. It runs around you. It holds itself together without your constant input. You don't need to check it the same way. You don't need to guide every movement. Your role changes again. It becomes less visible, less personal. You're not just an individual making decisions anymore. You're part of something that persists without you. A structure. It continues whether you're paying attention or not. It compounds. It expands. It builds on itself over time. And at this level, money stops feeling like something you manage. It starts to feel like something that carries forward on its own. Not for you. Through you. At every level, something changes. You gain something. Clarity, control, access. But something else stays constant. The pattern never leaves. It just evolves. At every level, things look better. The numbers get bigger. The decisions feel sharper. The system seems more open. But the constraint doesn't disappear. It changes form. It becomes harder to notice. You think you're moving forward, but really, you're moving across. From one limitation to another that feels more refined. At the beginning, you were limited by how much you earned, then by how you reacted, then by the rules you followed, then by how precise you were, then by what you were allowed to access, and eventually, by who and what you were close to. Each step felt like progress, because something expanded. But something else quietly narrowed at the same time. You didn't notice it at first, because every new constraint looked like an upgrade. You were told to optimize, to improve returns, to find better ways, to make things more efficient. So you did. You compared options. You adjusted your approach. You refined what you were doing. You believed the goal was to make the number grow faster. But that was never the real game. The number isn't the system. It's just what the system produces. You were never scaling wealth. You were scaling access. Access to different flows. Access to different decisions. Access to rooms you didn't even know existed before. At each level, the money didn't fundamentally change. What changed was what it was allowed to do, and where it was allowed to go, and who it was allowed to move alongside. The system doesn't reward whoever has the most. It rewards whoever can reach further. You don't move up by having more. You move when something lets you in. And once you see that clearly, the direction you thought you were heading in doesn't feel the same anymore. And that's where the real problem starts. Because you didn't do anything wrong. You followed the instructions exactly. Work harder. Stay consistent. Be disciplined. Save more than you spend. Move forward carefully. Avoid mistakes. You did all of it. And it gave you something real. Stability. Predictability. A sense of control over small things. But it never changed your position. Hard work doesn't grant access. It keeps you inside the same boundary longer. Saving money doesn't move you forward. It preserves where you already are. Climbing a career doesn't change the system you belong to. It just moves you higher inside the same one. You're still inside the same structure. Still under the same rules. Still limited by the same visibility. Discipline doesn't create wealth. It maintains behavior. Time doesn't multiply outcomes on its own. It only amplifies what the structure allows. If you're in the wrong structure, time doesn't help you escape. It just makes the limitation more permanent. Nothing broke. Nothing failed. You did what was expected. You just never moved out of the level where those actions matter. You stayed where they work, and never reached the place where they stop working. There's no fix for that inside the same system. No adjustment. No optimization. Because the problem was never how you executed. It was where you were standing. At higher levels, things get quieter. Not because less is happening. Because less needs to be done directly. You stop focusing on outcomes. You focus on placement. You stop asking how much something returns. You start looking at what it connects to. Money stops being the goal. It becomes a tool that moves through structures. And those structures determine everything that follows. Capital turns into influence. Influence creates proximity. Proximity changes what becomes available. And what becomes available defines what can actually be controlled. You don't chase movement anymore. You position yourself for it. You don't force growth. You allow it to move through the right channels. From the outside, it still looks the same. Numbers going up. Time passing. Decisions being made. But inside, the mechanism is completely different. It's not about building more. It's about standing where more already exists. Compounding stops being personal. It becomes structural. And once it becomes structural, it doesn't need you the way you thought it did. If you want to understand the system you're already inside, subscribe.